आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हम नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
On the Indo-Pacific thing, इसका ऑडियो क्यों नहीं आ रहा है? जो फिल्म्स प्ले हो रहा है उसका रिलायंस का नहीं आया, पूरा खत्म हो गया। अभी टीवीएस का शुरू हो गया है।
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हमारा। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
Emmy,
Good morning, Renuka. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Long time. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Excellency.
Good morning, Panambolo. I'm Masud Chile speaking.
Yes, right.
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see also?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, Renuka ji.
Good morning. Bataiye.
Yeah, just we will like to check actually whether the system is working fine.
It's working
Yeah,
very
the ma'am
well.
will be coming soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forbes, sir, would you like me to invite you, or would you start off on your own? Is what I wanted. I can't hear you.
As you'd like, Renuka. Whichever way you'd like to do it. Why don't you tee us off and then?
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that.
Good morning, Excellency. It's great to see you.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Excellency Saras, when I was in college,
Yeah.
I had a very good friend from Mexico whose name was Fernando Salas.
Oh, it's interesting that you say that because I have met Fernando, but throughout our separate lives, people have always said to him that they've known someone, Federico Salas, and they always tell me about Fernando Salas, and it's been like that. And we met just a couple of times a few years ago, but
Right.
It's interesting. Yes.
This was in college in California. We were there as students together for a few years. He was in economics, I was in engineering.
Exactly. Yes.
But we used to take a lot of courses together in economic development.
This was, which university was this?
This was at Stanford.
Stanford, yes.
So many years ago, like 35 years ago. So.
Well, it's I know. Have you kept in touch with him?
Not that much. We kept in touch for quite a few years, for maybe 10, 15 years. And then after that, through a mutual friend. But now I've kind of lost touch with the mutual friend as well, because over the last 5 or 6 years.
That happens, yes.
Yeah.
Amitabh, you have to let us know when everybody has joined so we can start.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Riva. This is Manoj Bharti.
Good morning.
Speaking.
Yeah.
Morning, Secretary.
Good morning, all the excellencies whom I can see.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
¿Todo bien?
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Muy bien.
Very good, very good.
hosting you.
Renuka, everybody has joined.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the Indo-Pacific Business Summit hosted by the Economic Diplomacy Division of the MEA and the Confederation of Indian Industry. This morning's session is being viewed by over 2,000 people already who have joined us on the CII Hive, and we will begin the session right away. To begin with this session, I'd like to invite upon Dr. Naushad Forbes, past President CII and Chairman Indo-Pacific Business Summit and Co-Chairman Forbes Marshall Private Limited, to kindly give his opening remarks and welcome everybody. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Renuka, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to this first session of the Indo-Pacific Business Summit. We greatly look forward to our engagement over these next 3 days. I'm delighted that we've had such a positive response to have over 2,500 participants joining us virtually from over 40 countries. This is one of the benefits of living in this virtual world that we inhabit. On behalf of CII and personally, a very warm welcome to you all for this first session on promoting trade facilitation in the Indo-Pacific through improved cross-border linkages and trade infrastructure. I'd like to especially welcome Ms. Riva Ganguly Das, our Secretary East from the Ministry of External Affairs in the Government of India, who has been promoting the Indian brand with a special focus on our nation's overseas engagement. We're privileged at this session to have so many high commissioners and ambassadors representing countries of the Indo-Pacific. I think all share a great enthusiasm for enhancing trade relations, and in particular trade relations with India. And while our trade has been growing in many of our bilateral engagements, I think we all agree that the potential to do much more is constantly there. Strengthening trade infrastructure is of particular interest to the Indo-Pacific, since there are gaps in trade integration among countries. All countries have been working on simplification, modernization, automation of trade processes and procedures. But clearly, there's much scope to do more. The WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement that was signed 4 years ago has greatly contributed to this endeavor. As you know, trade infrastructure includes ports, hinterland connectivity, airports, warehousing infrastructure, and labs and testing facilities, and harmonization of standards. While there is a lot of cooperation among countries in improving these linkages, there's still scope to do a lot more. Let me make a few quick recommendations and then look forward to hearing all our distinguished speakers today. First, it's crucial to undertake interventions that facilitate trade at the border itself. This includes improving customs and other border formalities, whether these are land border formalities or ports, improving the transparency of regulations and the capability and capacity with which transactions can be processed at each border. Second, all countries could devise coordination mechanisms among government agencies based on their own institutional structures and arrangements. That can help provide the necessary timely and transparent clearances that, that importers and exporters seek. National trade facilitation committees could coordinate these trade facilitation reforms across countries, both bilaterally and multilaterally. Third, it's important to keep focusing on digitization as a mechanism of enhancing trade facilitation. Promoting practices like pre-arrival processing to speed up clearances when goods actually reach, or paperless trade can really, through digital portals or a single window, can play a significant role in speeding up the movement of goods. Our overall objective in all of this should, of course, be seamless regional connectivity. All of that will allow a deeper integration of regional markets and enhance the prosperity that we all mutually seek. I much look forward to this session that I'm sure will range widely across all aspects of trade facilitation. And we could not have asked for greater representation and more powerful representation of the countries that have these allied interests in trade in the Indo-Pacific. With those initial comments, it's my great pleasure to request our Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Ms. Riva Ganguly Das, to deliver her keynote address. Ms. Ganguly Das has been one of our most illustrious diplomats. She's served with distinction around the world, including at the United Nations, and was most recently our High Commissioner in Bangladesh. Over to you, Ms. Das.
Thank you, Dr. Naushad. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to join the first edition of the Indo-Pacific Business Summit and speak about promoting trade facilitation in the region through improved cross-border linkages and trade infrastructure. In other words, touch upon the trade and economic aspect of the Indo-Pacific construct. I would like to take this opportunity to thank CII and, of course, our very active economic relations division for bringing together government, business chambers, enterprises, think tanks, and academia from all countries in the region to discuss this important subject. As you all are all aware, the concept of Indo-Pacific has gained increasing salience in recent years due to both geostrategic and geoeconomic reasons. Historically, the Indian and Pacific Oceans have enjoyed a deep connect, facilitating the flow of goods and people and building commerce and cultural linkages. In that sense, the Indo-Pacific has always been a seamless, contiguous region. While outlining India's vision for the Indo-Pacific at the Shangri-La Dialogue, Prime Minister Modi clearly indicated the geographical reach of India's idea of the Indo-Pacific, embracing Africa and extending to the Americas, which covers both the Indian and Pacific Oceans. With greater globalization and a rebalancing of power, this vast region has experienced strong and sustained economic growth, spreading from across the Pacific Rim to Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Gulf region, and all the way to the east coast of Africa. This economic dynamism has led to increased connectivity, regional integration, and greater economic opportunities. The Euro-Atlantic dimension of global developments has shifted eastwards. Now over 50% of global trade passes through the Indo-Pacific, and it produces over 62% of global GDP. Emerging economies of the region have become the primary drivers of the global growth, shifting the economic center of gravity to this region. The 21st century would see increasing focus to the Indo-Pacific region connecting Africa, Asia, Eurasia, Pacific coast, Oceania, and the Pacific coast of the Americas. For India, the Indo-Pacific has acquired growing significance because more and more of our trade is now headed to the east of India, and a significant part of it passes through the Indo-Pacific. To give you a sense, last year our bilateral trade with ASEAN was $87 billion, with China $82 billion, with Japan and Korea together it was $38 billion, with US it was over $88 billion, and with Australia around $13 billion. In the Indian Ocean region, our trade with Sri Lanka and Bangladesh together was around 15 billion. With UAE in the Gulf, our trade totaled 59 billion, and with Saudi Arabia, it was worth 33 billion. In Africa, with South Africa, Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania, we had a combined trade of around 18 billion. This economic dynamism of the region is equally reflected in India's relationship with the region. We place our neighborhood first, and we act east. We are strengthening relations with the states of West Asia and the Gulf as we think West. We have also intensified our partnership with countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Oceania. The Indo-Pacific region has been integrated well into India's foreign policy since the Look East policy in 1994 and the Act East policy in 2014. India has been a founding member of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, set up in 1997. We are actively involved in ASEAN-centric regional architecture and have forged stronger bonds with Pacific Islands Forum and Pacific Alliance. India has also enunciated its Sagar doctrine of security and growth for all in the region in 2015 and has articulated its Indo-Pacific vision in 2018, along with its practical implementation in the form of Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, or IPOI as we call it, in 2019. This first Indo-Pacific Business Summit builds upon the Sagar Doctrine and IPOI, which supports building of a rules-based regional architecture centered on 7 pillars, including trade and maritime connectivity. This 2-day event will no doubt help provide an industry viewpoint to this construct. India's Indo-Pacific vision envisages a free, open, and inclusive region which embraces all nations in the region and beyond in a common pursuit of progress and prosperity. The Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative is practical implementation of this vision with its 7 pillars of cooperation and collaboration. Promotion of trade and enhancing connectivity and cross-border linkages is one of the important pillars of IPOI. This trade, connectivity, and maritime transport pillar intends to focus joint efforts of the countries in the region towards enhancement of trade facilitation, simplification of maritime trade, better management of trade routes and logistics chain, creation of common trading standards, improvement of quality of maritime transport, reducing environmental footprint, enhancing meaningful connectivity, and synergizing various connectivity initiatives in the region. Similarly, coordinated efforts among countries on the other 6 pillars of IPOI, including maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, and science, technology, and academic cooperation can pay rich dividends. For instance, safeguarding the maritime space against piracy, technology-based solutions for addressing marine pollution, efficient response to natural and environmental disasters, sustainable management of marine resources, promoting the blue economy, capacity building, etc., create the overall enabling environment for promotion of trade and economic cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. Friends, India has demonstrated its commitment to promotion of trade facilitation through cross-border linkages and building infrastructure in our immediate neighborhood in the Indo-Pacific. Since 2005 and 6, India has extended lines of credit worth nearly $31 billion to more than 64 countries. Connectivity projects are being implemented at an unprecedented pace in our neighborhood. Railway projects with Bangladesh and Nepal, port projects in Iran and Myanmar, respectively, and inland water projects have created new transport corridors. The energy grids of India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and Myanmar are being linked. India has invested in power projects in Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. Power trade in our neighborhood has now become a reality. Hydrocarbon pipelines can now link India with Nepal and Bangladesh. Such cross-border linkages are not limited to physical infrastructure, but include digital linkages as well. The digital revolution and new technologies have added a new dimension to global interaction, which includes geopolitics and geoeconomics. Data and e-commerce regulation, cybersecurity, digital enablers, big data, fintech, which includes some developed in India, such as India Stack, Aadhaar, UPI, and the newest technologies are acquiring salience in international discussions. Our capacity to seamlessly navigate the tech world and its intersection with geopolitics and geoeconomics has potential to act as multiplier in trade facilitation. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our time and has potential to disrupt all aspects of global interaction, including trade and economic cooperation. India is amongst the front rank of nations in its climate ambition. Despite our development needs, we have shown strong commitment to climate action. Massive investments have been made in augmenting India's renewable power capacity. 24% of India's installed capacity comes from renewable resources. The Black Swan event, like the current pandemic, has highlighted inadequacies of the current global structure. The ability of the current global system to contain and prevent this crisis is under stress. The fundamental plank of an open economic order has been challenged during the pandemic. This has happened in the midst of a slowdown in global trade that predates the pandemic-induced slowdowns. The share of trade in global GDP has not grown in the last decade. It is the same with global capital flows. The flagship product of economic globalization was the global value chain or supply chain, which drove world trade. Now, not only has trade slowed down, the pandemic has also demonstrated that such supply chains can become vulnerabilities. They generate dependencies that can be crippling even when disruptions are not at pandemic levels. This and the recent global scale changes in technological and economic landscape has increased our resolve to make the supply chains resilient to future disruptions. This has also resulted in a launch of a supply chain resilience initiative, SCRI, in April 2021, with commitment to a free, fair, inclusive, transparent, and stable trade and investment. The SCRI will help in promoting trade facilitation by identifying supply chain risks and mapping out the complementarities. Last but not the least, better trade and economic cooperation can also be facilitated by comprehensive strengthening and reforming of the entire multilateral architecture, including the United Nations and its principal organs. There is need to make global governance more inclusive, representative, and participatory to facilitate greater and more meaningful participation of developing and least developed countries in global decision-making processes and structures and make it better attuned to contemporary realities. Friends, let me end my remarks by saying that there has been a paradigm shift in our thinking on how we pursue trade and economic growth in the new normal. Understandably, technology and innovation will play a critical role in the post-pandemic recovery, as will multilateral collaborations. To tide over the challenges, we need to strengthen connectivity, build infrastructure, and facilitate trade. We are focusing on tapping more trade, investment, and technology partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. Ground has been set for this with greater connectivity, trade facilitative measures, new labor laws, agricultural reforms, private sector entry into newer areas, and an incentive-driven push to promote manufacturing. This business summit, bringing together countries from all across the Indo-Pacific, is an excellent platform to exchange and develop ideas for trade facilitation and post-pandemic recovery in the region. I wish the summit a great success. I'm confident that we will see some constructive discussions over the course of the next few days and look forward to your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for those comments, which have, I think, set the tone for our discussions, not only in this session, but for the rest of the summit. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to request our first panelist, Excellency Barry O'Farrell, Australia's High Commissioner to India, to address us. Mr. O'Farrell has been High Commissioner in Delhi since early last year. He has previously been the Premier of New South Wales, Australia's largest state. So look forward very much to your comments, High Commissioner.
Namaskar and good morning, especially to Secretary East and my fellow ambassadors and high commissioners. And thank you, Dr. Forbes, for your comments as well. I also want to thank the Ministry of External Affairs and the Confederation of Indian Industry for organising the event, bringing together, as Secretary East said, government, business, think tanks and academics to explore how we can improve our trade linkages, the importance of which have been thrown into sharp relief over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID has represented an unprecedented disruption to trade and investment. It's estimated that in 2020, global merchandise trade fell around 9%. Global investment flows took an even bigger hit, almost halving last year. At the same time, COVID-19 has also reminded us of the critical importance of the free flow of goods, services and investment to our shared economic prosperity, both in terms of the rules that govern those trade flows and the infrastructure that supports our supply chains. These are essential to ensuring the supply of medical supplies, food, protecting livelihoods and driving economic recovery. To grow our region, our goal must be to work together to keep trade flowing in the Indo-Pacific. I want to discuss a few ways we can do that. First, we can progress free trade agreements, FTAs, to facilitate enhanced cross-border trade. Trade agreements set expectations for trade and investment to be based on transparent rules and transparent standards. They also help address barriers to the flow of goods and services. The more that we build confidence and trust in our trading rules, the more we'll be able to strengthen our economic integration. Australia has long been a champion of free trade and is party to 15 FTAs, the majority of which are with Indo-Pacific partners. They include both bilateral and multilateral agreements. We negotiate FTAs to benefit Australian exporters, importers, producers and investors by reducing and eliminating barriers to international trade investment and opening up new market access. To best facilitate trade flows across our borders, whether under an FTA or not, we're also working to simplify our trading system. In this year's budget, the Australian government announced an investment of more than $38 million dedicated to continuing that process. In June last year, Australia and India's Prime Ministers elevated the bilateral relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, or a CSP. And under that CSP, Australia and India agreed to re-engage on a bilateral trade agreement. Officials are currently considering ways to progress the agreement, building on earlier bilateral discussions. This sends a clear signal of the high-level commitment the Australian government places on the free flow of trade and investment in our region to our mutual economic benefit. That objective has the support of Australian business. The 2021 Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry National Trade Survey found that when polled about the prospects of future trade agreements for Australia, India was regarded as the leading nation of future potential opportunity. Secondly, we can facilitate trade by supporting global trading institutions. This is crucial in an increasingly complex geostrategic environment where we're seeing challenges to the rules-based order, including in relation to trade. As our Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Dan Tehan, noted recently, the World Trade Organization remains the only institution that develops, monitors and enforces global trade rules. He argued that for a properly functioning WTO to set the rules that we need, but also to act as the independent arbiter when those rules are not being adhered to. Australia is a strong supporter of efforts to help modernise the WTO in its functions, including to embrace rules that address distortionary behaviour and increase market openness. To echo our Minister for Finance, Simon Birmingham, speaking in Mumbai last year, not everyone, not even great friends and partners like Australia and India, will easily agree to the same rules or to the same degree of economic openness. But we should and must stand firm together in the face of coercive behaviour and encourage openness, fairness and transparency in our engagement with all our partners. Supporting a system of mutually agreed upon rules and ensuring their enforceability provides certainty to international trade, which is critical to its effective facilitation. Thirdly, we can build resilient supply chains that are able to deal with future challenges. COVID-19 has shown us the scale of those challenges and the importance of this work. Governments and businesses need to collaborate to identify supply chain vulnerabilities and to develop plans to mitigate against the risk of disruption. The Supply Chain Resilient Initiative, launched by Indian, Australian and Japanese trade ministers earlier this year, is a good example of this kind of collaboration. Digitising elements of our trade processes may also help bolster the resilience of supply chains. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the benefits of e-trade. Paperless customs procedures and electronic certification for agricultural exports will lower the cost and increase the efficiency of doing business, delivering practical benefits to exporters. Fourthly and finally, even in this digital world, we'll never lose the need for the infrastructure that supports and drives our supply chains, moving goods and services across borders. As an island nation, Australians are acutely aware of the importance of this infrastructure, the cogs of the global trade. But be they roads, railways, airports or seaports, their proper functioning is critical to trade facilitation. Failure in these systems can have major impacts on supply chains and global trade flows, as we saw recently when the container vessel Ever Given became wedged in the Suez Canal, a multi-billion-dollar problem that temporarily paralysed trade flows through the Gulf. India is investing heavily in its infrastructure and logistics sectors, and I know it's keen for other countries, including Australia, to also invest. Australian companies are already in India, playing a vital role in the logistics sector, including Linfox Logistics. Linfox has been in India since 2006 and employs almost 2,500 people from across the country to manage its 1.9 million square feet of warehousing space. I look forward to continuing my work to promote opportunities for Australian and Indian business as we increase our economic cooperation, including in infrastructure and logistics, to build the machinery that drives our trade. All of these endeavours, free trade agreements, supporting global trading rules, building resilient supply chains, and developing and improving on trade infrastructure can be done in partnership. Making those partnerships work is my job, and I look forward to partnering with you as we work to increase our trading relationships and our support for a free, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for those comments. Thank you. I'd like to turn next to Excellency Juan Angulo, the ambassador to India of Chile. Ambassador Angulo is an economics graduate, has served as a professional diplomat across the world, representing his country. Look forward to your comments, Excellency.
Thank you very much. Dear Dr. Nahusha Forbes, dear Secretary East Riva Ganguly, authorities attending this seminar, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the Indo-Pacific Business Summit for your kind invitation to participate as a speaker today and share our experience promoting trade facilitation at the challenging times of trade due to the sanitary crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has stressed the logistic chains that support international trade, and restrictive measures have disrupted both the productive and the movement capacity in ports and airports around the world. Governments have been confronted to question their own role in world trade and how they address the economic shutdown during times of crisis. Unfortunately, many governments have chosen to adopt protectionist measures. Chile continues to maintain a rules-based free trade policy. Since the COVID-19 breakout, we have actively worked in national and international strategies to ensure unrestricted trade flows and a sustainable economic recovery. Chile has a long-standing political and economic relationship with the Indo-Pacific. with a long history of friendly diplomatic relations with the region. On the economic front, we have developed strong bilateral economic ties with many Indo-Pacific countries through a wide network of trade agreements. We also participate in many multilateral initiatives to collaborate with a strong spirit of unity and solidarity. One of the main priorities of our economic policy is promoting trade facilitation. The primary goal of trade facilitations is to help trade across borders, imports and exports, and make it faster, cheaper, and more predictable, ensuring its safety and security. In terms of focus, it is about simplifying and harmonizing formalities, procedures, and related exchange of information and documents between the various partners in the supply chain. From our perspective, we can summarize trade facilitation as simplification and harmonization of procedures, reduction of time and costs, elimination of barriers to trade, and a strategic insertion on global value chains. In order to promote trade facilitation, we have included in our current trade negotiation with several countries in the region principles such as publication and transparency, release of goods, exports audits, express shipments, single windows to simplify procedures, and authorized economic operators, and also, of course, custom cooperation. In times of a global economic crisis, some countries have closed their markets as a consequence of trade restrictive measures or border control, and also the strong deficiencies in international trade logistics have been detected. Ports have been affected or are only partially operating. There have been delays in custom procedures. There is a lack of containers and storage facilities, and local measures that restrict movement have affected cargo transportation to domestic markets. One of the main obstacles and difficulties for unrestricted trade is the requirement for exporters and importers to present paper documentation for each import-export transaction before the local custom authorities and domestic sanitary agencies. In order to deal with the situation during the pandemic, Chile has negotiated the following trade facilitation measures. Concerning certificates of origin, we have called on our trading partners to negotiate the mutual acceptance of electronic copies of certificates of origin during the crisis. We have adopted these trade facilitation measures with several countries in the region, including Indonesia, Japan, Thailand, India, Malaysia, and also extra-regional like the European Union, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. We have also established contact points to expedite communications and consultations regarding the verification of certificates of origin. Concerning sanitary certificates, we have ameliorated our internal agencies coordination in order to expedite imports and also promptly issue sanitary certificates for our exports. The agencies hold periodic meetings in order to review new trade facilitation procedure. As an example, Chile and India have agreed on electronic certificates for agricultural products in the phytosanitary matters. Chile has also established a national committee on trade facilitation, where our authorities meet periodically in order to discuss measures to counterbalance increasing trade restrictions. We also created a working group, public and private, to address the particular and specific challenges that each of the regions of Chile face regarding international trade. Also, Chile has joined international declarations and initiatives to maintain unrestricted trade. I can talk about the Joint Declaration on Supply Chain Connectivity, signed in March 2020, and the statement of the Ottawa Group in June 2020. But these two groups are working together, but also the sanitary crisis demonstrated the value of the digital economy and digital trade. In this regard, Chile developed a digital application to formally inform economic authorities of any technical barrier to trade and sanitary and phytosanitary measures that may affect our exports, and this information allows us to evaluate possible mechanisms to eliminate such barriers. Additionally, we implemented an online platform to search for import and export tariffs for all FTAs currently in force in Chile. Due to the borderless nature of the internet, consistent and coordinated global rules and regulations will help ensure a competitive and fair playing field for the flow of international trade in the global digital economy. In this context, I will quickly refer to the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement signed by New Zealand, Singapore, and Chile in June 2020. This digital partnership is a comprehensive and forward-looking pathfinder agreement that addresses key issues in the digital economy, such as the use of electronic documentation in cross-border trade and business, personal information protection, cybersecurity, online consumer protection, digital identities, fintech, artificial intelligence, and innovation. Through the digital partnership, the parties can build on existing trade agreement commitments by leveraging on technology and facilitate business-to-business connectivity in the digital age. Chile is convinced that digital partnerships such as this one will allow our business and consumers to better participate in the digital economy and to take advantage of the numerous opportunities presented by the digitalization of trade. One last important instrument for trade facilitation that I wish to refer is to global value chain, which counts for approximately 70% of our global trade. The key focus of Chile in this area relates to productive linkages and production complementarity, address foreign direct investments, and enhance regional value chains for economic cooperation, the strengthening of multilateralism, rebuilding resilient supply chains, enhancing regional integration, and fostering sustainable economic recovery. To conclude, I would like to highlight that in our view, is of the utmost importance to minimize disruptions to cross-border trade and global supply chains and adopt only targeted, proportionate, transparent, and temporary emergency measures in trade. Chile encourages its trading partners to ensure that trade flows are unrestricted in order to quickly and successfully restore our economic and trade order, which is essential for the livelihood of our livelihoods and citizens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for those very specific and valuable inputs. Next, move to the Ambassador to France to India, Monsieur Emmanuel Lenné. Monsieur Lenné has worked in the Prime Minister's office, has represented France at the United Nations, and is now in India. We look forward to your comments, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you to EMEA, to CII for organizing this forum. I'm going to be brief since I'm a member of a French government intervening later today. And but basically, I think it's very timely meeting. I mean, Indo-Pacific is really at the top of the agenda for all our countries, and we're working a lot and with like-minded countries like Australia, and hello to my colleague, on maritime security and various initiatives, but obviously building strong infrastructures and along the trade routes is also a top priority for all our countries. And let me maybe briefly tell you what we're doing, what our priorities are in that area. We want for sure to build quality and infrastructures and foster blue economy. That's one. We want to also to foster digital infrastructure. That's two. And doing that, we want to promote the respect for climate change and three main priorities. On the infrastructure, as much as already been said, there's a strong push by our government agencies, by our company to be present, to take part to this common effort. French, obviously, companies working in the area of transportation. A company like CMA CGM has been present in India and the region for several decades, and they have increased recently their presence by signing an agreement with Adani to operate a terminal in the port of Mundra in Gujarat in 2014. There's also companies like Bolloré, very active in the field of logistics, management of terminals, and they have stakes in large ports in India, like the port of Tuticorin in the south of the country. Government agencies are also supporting. The French Development Agency, AFD, support projects in the port of Kochi and Chennai, and also Surat. And at the government level, There's been ample discussion between Prime Minister Modi, President Macron, especially since 2019, and they agreed on a roadmap to develop this sort of infrastructures. I've been talking about port, but obviously, as I said before, ports to be efficient, they need good railway infrastructures to support them, and in that sector also, French companies are very present. The national railway company SNCF has been cooperating with Indian Railways for more than 30 years also. But we also support the freight corridors, which are being developed in India. Company like Alstom is working a lot on the Eastern Corridor and providing any sort of equipment for signaling, telecommunications, electrification, and will produce in India, make in India more than 800 electric locomotives in a factory in Bihar. So that's one, infrastructure, quality infrastructure. Two, second priority is digital infrastructures. We're working a lot with that. We're working with all the institutions, with CDAC and all our partners, and we feel that it's very important. Each time, I mean, I have some business delegations, some people from also from France asking me how are the infrastructures in India, where sell them, and they say that the roads, the railways. I say, yeah, but have a look to the 21st century infrastructure, digital. And in that area, India is very strong, and we are very happy to cooperate with India and making great progress. Third priority is the climate change, environment, and biodiversity. All these actions must be in keeping with our commitments. It's very important, and as you know, my country, India, launched the International Solar Alliance in 2015, and we really want now to expand the reach of this alliance. And obviously, Indo-Pacific is a key area where we want to launch the first project to promote solar energy. And it's moving right now in the right direction, thanks to many of your countries. We've been expanding the membership, and in the process of raising new resources. And beyond that, we're doing a lot already in India. I mean, about 10% of the installed capacity in India for solar is by French companies, but we want to work more together in the Indo-Pacific region, and that's really the spirit of the cooperation right now. That being said, I will listen very with great interest to the exchanges. I think we have a lot to do, all our countries together in the Indo-Pacific, and I think there's plenty of opportunity to our joint efforts for prosperity, but for also to make the region even safer and even I would say eco-friendly or respectful of biodiversity and mindful of the climate change issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Linné. And I turn next to Ambassador Satoshi Suzuki from Japan.
Thank you, Dr. Forbes, Ms. Riva Gangri, Secretary East, my dear colleague ambassadors, distinguished participants. Good morning and namaskar to you all. I would like to thank CII for hosting this event in partnership with MEA and bringing together the various experts from all the corners of this region. As Secretary East mentioned at the outset, it is still fresh in our minds that Prime Minister Modi unveiled the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, IPOI, in his speech at the East Asia Summit in 2019. This is a foresighted initiative in the sense that it reflects the critical two realities of that time. One is the peace and security in this region is paramount for the stability and prosperity of the entire world, given its weight in global economy. The second reality is that collective efforts are necessary to cope with various challenges that this region is faced with. Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision and India's IPOI attach emphasis on a nearly identical set of fundamental principles and values. Therefore, it was natural for Japan to agree to take a lead in the seventh pillar of IPOI, which centers on connectivity. I believe this to be an important pillar, as economic and trade connectivity within this region will play a vital role in a post-COVID world. 2020 was a year in which countries around the world struggled against the spread of COVID-19. And halfway through 2021, we are still in the midst of this pandemic. After having witnessed the disruption of global supply chains caused by this pandemic, we are now painfully aware of the risks inherent in global production and logistics. For example, Japanese automakers were severely affected by temporary disruptions in their production lines in Asia. The risks that companies must deal with today are increasingly more complex in nature. In addition to the traditional risks such as geopolitical uncertainty, trade restrictions, tariff measures, and currency fluctuations, companies now have to deal with new risks such as climate change, more frequent and devastating natural disasters, and cyber risks. With COVID-19 related disruptions on top of these risks, I believe no one of participating countries nor companies can mitigate these risks on their own. The pandemic has made us recognize the need to change the way we connect and interact with each other in order to collectively cope with these risks in a more resilient manner. Maintaining supply chain resilience through better connectivity and risk management is going to be the top driver of the success for companies in the post-COVID world. Both the public and private sectors must work together to achieve this end by vigorously taking such measures as visualization of supply chains using digital technology, facilitation of trade procedures, and harmonization of regulations and standards. The Japanese government is now working together with like-minded governments through such frameworks as the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative with India and Australia, and the Quad with India, Australia, and the United States to further these ends. Let us take a step back and take a look at the potential economic gain that India could have by connecting its market with the rest of the Indo-Pacific region. Just as an illustration, let me compare the ratio of export sales to total sales of Japanese companies operating in various places in Asia. The export sales ratio of Japanese companies in many ASEAN countries are in the upper 40 to 50% zone, meaning that they export roughly what they produce in these countries. Even in China, where the domestic market is huge, the Japanese companies have a 33% export sales ratio. On the other hand, in India, this ratio of Japanese companies remains at a low 18%, almost half of that in China. This shows how companies operating in India are still very much focused on the domestic market. When we consider the fact that export-oriented companies have a tendency to show a better profit focus, I believe that there is still much room to be gained if India connects itself deeper and wider into the greater Indo-Pacific region. This gain is not limited to the traditional trade of goods. We all know that India is home to many startups. Since the beginning of 2021 alone, 10 unicorn companies were born from India despite the severity of the pandemic. Rather, the pandemic has accelerated the speed of digital transformation, and these companies have managed to meet the expectations of people using digital technology. The Indo-Pacific can offer a broader consumer basis to these companies, and indeed, we are witnessing Indian startups expanding their businesses in Asia. India's excellent human resources in the area of IT and Japan's strength in technology, quality, and the supply chain network in Asia could be combined to bring benefits to all peoples of the region to further accelerate the digital transformation in Asia and beyond. Finally, I'd like to point out once again that emerging risks that we see only serve to increase the need for all stakeholders to collaborate to overcome these risks and grasp further growth. In this regard, today's summit is offering an excellent opportunity for all participants. So let me offer my best wishes for the success of this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suzuki-san, and thank you for pointing the way forward and the potential that exists in our trading relations, especially from India. I next turn to Ambassador Federico Salas from Mexico. Over to you, Ambassador. And you know, one of the interesting things for many of our distinguished high commissioners and ambassadors who are with us today is that you've all served not only representing your countries in various locations overseas, but also have served at various multilateral institutions. And I think some of the themes of the rules-based international order and so on are things that you are so well placed to speak about. So over to you, Ambassador Salas.
Thank you very much. I am want to start off by thanking CII for organizing this forum. I think it's very important that we have this discussion. I have been a promoter here during my stint here in India of the fact that we should not forget that the Indo-Pacific does extend to our shores on our Pacific coast in the Americas, and that is a very important thing. And I'm glad that we're looking at that aspect of it. I also want to thank Secretary East, who is here with us today, and of course the MEA for their support, and you, Dr. Forbes, for chairing this panel. And of course, I want to thank the ambassadors, high commissioners that have preceded me. They have facilitated my job because they have talked about the context in which we are, the global context in which we are working today. So I will skip that and go directly to some what I think are some specific points regarding what Mexico is doing in terms of building a trade infrastructure and infrastructure in general that will be interesting and useful for the purposes of the subjects that we're discussing today. Presently, this Mexican government that is in office right now has agreed this mutual agreement between the government and the private sector to facilitate and accelerate a national, what we call a national infrastructure plan, as a strategic driver to enhance the economy on the energy, communication, and transport sector with an annual investment of 5% of GDP. There are 1,600 projects that were identified in highways, airports, ports, railways and suburban trains, water desalination plants, telecommunication, electric power generation, gas pipeline, fuel storage, and urban transportation. Mexico has also dedicated $13 billion investment into the telecommunication infrastructure in the last decade, aiming to create a shared mobile network that will boost competitiveness and bring connectivity to millions. The result of this, what I've just mentioned, is already visible and has been bringing fruits, facilitating manufacturing and trade and increasing connectivity, both within the North American region, that is Canada, the United States, and Mexico, as well as with Central America, and of course, with our Pacific neighbors, not only in the Americas, but across the Pacific Ocean, as well as the Atlantic. And as I said, the results are evident. Mexico has become, as of April 2021, the first trading partner of the United States. We are the fourth country with the fastest e-commerce growth last year. And from January to May of this year, Mexican exports grew 125% more than in the same period last year. We also became the 9th more attractive market for FDI in 2020, according to an UNCTAD report. One of the things that we're doing, and I think that is particularly interesting when we talk about the region of the Indo-Pacific, is what we're doing in terms of port infrastructure, which plays a key role in government plans. Mexico has 16 major ports and more than 100 port terminals. In 2020, there was an 18.9% increase in the public budget for 15 port projects and 18 maritime terminals, in tandem with private investment for the first year and 25 more projects by 2024. In our Pacific coast, that is the one that's facing to this part of the world, we are working modernizing our ports in different parts of the country. And one issue that I think is particularly interesting and important is the development that we're doing of the Tehuantepec Isthmus Rail Corridor to the Gulf of Mexico in the Atlantic, starting with the construction of a seawall. The idea, of course, is that this corridor will be parallel to the Panama Canal, and it will be a key part of Mexico's current multimodal infrastructure development, worth an estimated over $5 billion US. This corridor will modernize the freight rail, roads, and airport services, which connects both oceans, arriving in the port of Coatzacoalcos on the Gulf of Mexico, with two main trenches. There will be a logistic corridor, which includes the modernization and expansion of railways with fiber optics connectivity, as well as an upgrade of both seaports and enhanced highways. There will be a regional energy corridor, a natural gas pipeline, and as well as a crude oil pipeline that will provide power to the electrical, metal, mechanical, textile, and agro-industrial sectors. Likewise, there will be hydroelectric and geothermal plants that will be installed to consolidate the corridor. There will be 10 development poles through industrial production ecosystems, linking productive chains and local skills in the agro-industry, food, metals, wood, plastics and rubber, textile, petrochemical, machinery and equipment, and transport sectors. This will also open a free economic zones and facilities, including reduced taxation in 76 municipalities in Mexico for companies that want to use this shortcut to transport their goods. It will also promote the cultural diversity, conservation, and growth, of course, of natural resources. The corridor that I'm talking about, which is in the thin part of Mexico, will connect to other coasts and inland highways. 10 of these highways will be modernized, and 22 freeways will be finished by 2024, and as well as 86 will be renovated to improve connectivity with the rest of the country and the Pacific corridor with Central America. This adds also to 85 existing airport facilities and 27,000 kilometers of railways that move 28% of all cargo inland, with import-export movements accounting for 50% of them all the way to Canada. I think that this corridor and this infrastructure project will certainly help facilitate and attract trade to our part of the world in the Americas, and of course, as I was saying, facilitate the transit that may be achieved of going from the Pacific all the way to the Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Salas. Thank you for those comments. Before I go to our last panelist, I'd just like to welcome and recognize many of our distinguished high commissioners and ambassadors from India to various countries of the Indo-Pacific, who I also see on our screen. So welcome, welcome, Excellencies. Our last panelist is Excellency Dr. Hussein Niaz, the High Commissioner of the Republic of the Maldives. Over to you, High Commissioner.
Thank you. Good morning to Dr. Naushad Forbes, past President of CIA and Co-Chairman, Forbes Marshall Private Limited. Ms. Riva Ganguly, Secretary East, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Ambassadors, High Commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you all. Let me begin by expressing profound appreciation to the Confederation of Indian Industry for giving me this opportunity to engage in the first edition of the Indo-Pacific Summit, developing a roadmap for shared prosperity. Let me also take this opportunity to applaud the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which was launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in order to ensure the safety, security, and stability of the maritime domain. As one of the newest members of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, the Maldives is keen in strengthening its regional collaboration towards maritime security and commercial prosperity in the Indian Ocean region. We look forward to working closely with the Government of India in this regard. As we meet here today virtually, the world economy is in its most worst since the 2008 financial crisis. Developing economies are struggling to breathe, particularly small island developing states, such as the Maldives, has been hit hard by COVID-19 pandemic. States being large ocean economies are faced by extraneous challenges when compared to other groups of poor and vulnerable countries, such as non-SIDS LDCs and landlocked developing countries. The impacts may be longer lasting and more critical. Most of these states being highly dependent on tourism and fishing, the pandemic has exacerbated their unique and overwhelming challenges related to connectivity, a high level of dependence on external trade, remoteness and prohibitive transport costs, food security, infrastructure gaps, resilience, sustainability, and access to finance, just to name a few. As economies strive towards this recovery, enhanced policies for ease of trade facilitation, particularly at the regional level, will remain an important strategy, as trade will allow growth and sustainable development. The need for regional integration in this matter will be a key factor towards positive contribution to the economic recovery and a sustainable economic growth. Like any other developing economy, trade remains a major source of growth for the Maldives. Situated at a strategic intersection of international trade routes, the Maldives has its benefits and challenges. Increasing the economic resilience of Maldives and promoting greater regional cooperation in South Asia as key goals of the Maldives foreign policy. The government aims to increase its trade relations with its bilateral partners. In this regard, the Maldives is a signatory to the main regional trade agreements, namely Agreement on South Asian Free Trade Area SAFTA, SAARC Agreement on Trade in Services SACIS, Agreement on the Establishment of South Asian Regional Standards Organization SARSO, and Framework Agreement on Trade Preferential Systems among the member states of the Organization of Islamic Countries, among others. It is notable that trade facilitation can bring significant impact on regional integration, thereby reducing the burden of trade due to differences in customs formalities and cross-border requirements that may hinder trade in the region. Trade facilitation has also enabled reduced cost, time, and uncertainty of international trade. As a small island developing state, Maldives too faces barriers to trade effectively. The Indian Ocean region is one of the most poorly integrated regions in the world. This is costing us not only in terms of collective collaboration on substantial issues, but also materially as well, condemning our people to a slower pace of economic growth. The COVID-19 pandemic brought the nation's economy to a standstill, making it a virtually zero-income country overnight. Heavily dependent on its tourism sector, the revenue fell sharply in 2020 with a decrease in the tourist arrivals by 70% on 2020. The real GDP declined by almost 30% in the same year due to the drastic decline in the tourism sector and other related sectors. With borders closed, trade in goods and services was impacted negatively. Countries like the Maldives import more goods than it exports, causing negative trade balance in goods. The challenges we faced were unique to states like us: low connectivity, lack of adequate trade infrastructure such as ports and airports. Furthermore, the stringent measures the government was forced to take due to the pandemic added to the adverse impact on the trade activities of the country. Despite these challenges, with generous help from our international partners and the strategic measures taken by the government, we were able to manage the disruptions in supply chains without major shortfalls. Special arrangements were made with our key trading partners, namely India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Malaysia, for weekly cargo flights in order to manage food supply. This would not have been possible without the timely support we received from our partners, despite our own challenges due to their own challenges due to the pandemic outbreak. Nevertheless, the COVID-19 pandemic has also highlighted the need to enhance the linkages between domestic, regional, and international networks as crucial. International collaboration, coordination, and solidarity among public and private sector stakeholders will be key to overcoming this unprecedented global challenge. We need to look into innovative approaches. The need for digital connectivity has become ever more important. Processes related to trade need to be simplified. At the same time, efforts to combat cybercrime and cyber threats need to be scaled up. Many of the measures require investment in human, institutional, and technological capacities, and should thus be given priority for immediate technical support by development partners. Even before the current pandemic, developing countries were already confronted with challenges to undertake the necessary investments in trade infrastructure and services and trade facilitation reforms. It is thus imperative for the government to adopt common approaches in addressing challenges we face today across the global network of supply chains to avoid widespread economic collapse and critical supply chain disruptions. Collective effort at intra-regional level remains more essential for the world's poorest and most vulnerable. In the absence of urgent action in this regard, the post-pandemic economic recovery may be severely hampered, potentially worsening long-term sustainable development prospects for countries like the Maldives. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Thank you. Thank you all, Excellencies, for those very far-reaching and, I think, comprehensive remarks. I'll just make a few closing comments before we move to the next session. I think your comments this morning both set the stage for our summit in general and also provide us with an agenda for work in the years ahead. I think they reiterate the Indo-Pacific is the world's most dynamic region, the most dynamic economic region, certainly in terms of economic growth, in terms of investment opportunities, in terms of the exciting things that are happening across all the countries represented, whether it's investments in infrastructure, improvements in trade agreements, or enhancement of investment opportunities. One of the, when I was in college, this was many years ago, we used to talk about center-periphery relations. And the big issue then, it was always a somewhat derogatory term, it seemed to me. One of the big issue at that time was, would the periphery ever start trading with the periphery adequately such that it could enhance its own prosperity? I think in the years that after that, intra-Asian trade really took off and started to demonstrate that actually the world could develop in a very effective way with countries trading one with the other instead of through some earlier dominant third party. But without question, I think the session this morning demonstrated the importance of further diversification, the great scope that exists for trade with Latin America, the great scope that exists for trade with all the island economies of the Indo-Pacific that are so much a key element of the Indo-Pacific. There are opportunities across the entire Indo-Pacific region. I think the comments that we heard this morning covered both the what of trade facilitation and the how of trade facilitation. The what of trade facilitation that we heard covers issues around transparency, digitalization, standards, issues of maritime and air connectivity, and then also on the mechanics of trade that are so important and vital to actually enabling trade to happen, whether that's the availability of containers that was pointed out, or indeed paperless transactions in our current times. But I think those points, I think, would have been made even if we'd had the session before COVID, and I think will remain issues that we need to address after COVID. The how of trade facilitation and the comments that were made, I think, really reflect our very unusual current times. The points around supply chain resilience are very important. I think the words that were used, I think, are quite distinctive. The importance of diversification, the importance of deepening our trade relationships, the importance of coordination. I think that word was used again and again in many of the comments that we heard this morning. If I could end on one point, it's can we devise in the Indo-Pacific a normalization agenda? That what is our normalization agenda? Can we have a common normalization agenda for building a more normal world post-COVID? What does that involve? It probably involves pieces like mutually recognizing vaccine certificates that are issued by each country, air travel arrangements with providing for safe travel between different countries, and norms under which different airlines are allowed to operate, and so on, such that we start getting back in a more coordinated, organized, systematic way to the world that we used to know. I can only say that speaking as an industrialist, speaking as a businessman who used to travel all the time and hasn't traveled at all in the last year and a half, I look forward to returning to that more normal world where one can move around much more freely, and a world where one can form those relationships that at the end of the day are the foundation for really building both understanding and economic prosperity. So thank you all, Excellencies. Thank you, Secretary Ganguly Das, for being with us. Thank you for your very rich comments this morning. We greatly appreciate the time that you've given us. We greatly appreciate the direction that you've provided to this summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, Mr. Forbes. With that, we close the session. A great start to the Indo-Pacific Business Summit. And the next session will begin at 11:30. I request everyone to log in again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renuka. Thanks.